Hi, welcome back to the channel. This is a story I never thought I'd share. Not because it's scandalous, just personal in a way that still echoes. My name's Elena. I'm 29, live alone in a small but sunlit apartment in South Austin. I work as a UX designer for a mid-sized creative tech firm. It's not glamorous, but I like it. I like solving problems people don't even know they have. I'm not the life of the party type. I've always been more of a watch and observe kind of girl. I had my share of mess in my early 20s, so now I chase quiet, not chaos. I thought I had a good rhythm going until the day Micah Kane walked into our morning stand-up. Tall, calm, not trying too hard. There was something about him like he'd already lived through a whole chapter of life I hadn't read yet. He had this way of standing still in a room full of buzzing people. The kind of stillness that isn't awkward, it's grounded. When our manager introduced him as the new senior creative strategist, I smiled politely. He returned it with a nod and this dry, almost teasing line. I promise I'm only disruptive in strategy, not in conversation. It wasn't funny, but it made me smirk. I liked that he didn't try too hard. Over the next few days, we kept running into each other, waiting for coffee in the kitchen, walking out of meetings standing by the elevator. Nothing dramatic, just consistent. One Thursday, I was heating up a sad leftover taco, and he stepped in with a bottle of cold brew. We started chatting about Austin weather, the company's chaotic Slack culture, and somehow ended up on the topic of classic films. He said he missed quiet cinemas where people didn't check their phones. I told him I missed silence that didn't feel awkward. That's the thing about Micah, he never rushed the conversation. He asked questions that made you feel seen, not scanned. At one point, he said I used to live in New York. Left after my divorce. The city wasn't the problem I just needed a reset. No bitterness, no pity grab, just facts. I nodded and said, sometimes stillness teaches louder than noise. He looked at me for a moment like he heard that in his bones. Friday came and our team went out for happy hour at this rooftop bar. The sun was setting, music playing low. I had one glass of wine, he sipped neat bourbon. Everyone was loud and loose, but we ended up tucked at the end of the patio just talking. About nothing and everything. When the crowd started thinning, he glanced at me and said, "You need a ride." I hesitated for a second, then nodded. The drive was short. Jazz played softly from his speakers. The windows were half open, catching the spring breeze. When we stopped in front of my building, I unbuckled my seatbelt, turned to thank him. And that's when he said it. Soft. Almost under his breath, like he didn't expect me to react. Don't fall for me unless you're ready for something real. I froze for half a second, thinking it was a joke. But he wasn't laughing. He said it like a truth, not a flirt. I gave a small smile, said goodnight, and closed the door. And for the rest of that weekend, his voice lived in my mind. Not the words, the way he said them. Measured, earnest, like someone who had decided long ago not to waste time pretending. Monday morning, I walked in early. Micah was already at his desk, earbuds and typing something intently. I walked past, heart steady but curious. He didn't look up. I didn't say anything. Until lunch. The kitchen was empty when I came in to grab my sandwich. He was there pouring tea. He looked over and said, "You still alive after that rooftop rose?" I chuckled, barely. That bartender was generous. We ended up sitting at the tiny round table near the window. I was halfway through a bite when he said I think I might have said something weird Friday night. I looked up. Swallowed. About real things, I asked. He nodded. I tend to do that, say things and pretend I didn't. Our eyes met. For a little longer than polite, and neither of us looked away. That moment, it didn't feel like flirting. It felt like a line being drawn, and a choice whether to step over it. We changed the subject. Talked about Texas heat work deadlines, someone's horrible meme in the company chat. But that moment stayed with me. Then came Friday lunch. Same table, same spot. He asked about my dog, how long I'd had her. I asked about his favorite cities. We were laughing, relaxed. And then right when I was least ready for it, he leaned slightly forward, held my gaze and said, "You know, I could be your husband, if you ever asked." He said it like a joke, but his eyes didn't blink. And for the first time, I didn't know if my heart was skipping out of joy or warning. I laughed. It was automatic. The kind of laugh you do when you don't know what else to do. "That's bold," I said, trying to play it light. But he didn't follow my lead. He just smiled gently and looked down at his cup. Sorry, he murmured. Sometimes I say the right thing the wrong way. I shook my head. No, it's not that. I wasn't expecting it. Neither was I, he replied. And just like that, the conversation shifted. Not awkward, just different. He checked his watch and said he had a meeting. I nodded. He got up, tossed his cup, and walked out of the kitchen. And I just sat there, staring at the condensation on my glass, wondering if I should have said something else, something more. The rest of that day, I couldn't focus. It wasn't what he said, it was how it felt. Too sincere to be a joke, too quiet to be a game. And the part that unsettled me the most. I didn't hate it. I tried to brush it off like I always do when things feel too big too soon. I dove into work. I answered emails. I redesigned an onboarding screen that didn't even need redesigning. But by late afternoon, I caught myself checking the hallway, waiting to see if he'd pass by again. He didn't. The next morning, I came in a little early. Micah was already there again, typing away. He didn't look up. Didn't say good morning. Just stayed in his bubble. I told myself it was nothing, that he was probably just in the zone. But something about it felt colder than usual. Later that day, I saw him talking to Ava from HR. She laughed at something he said, touching his arm lightly. I wasn't jealous, not exactly, but there was this weird ache in my chest, like I'd left a window open and a cold wind slipped in. When lunch rolled around, I didn't go to the kitchen. I ate at my desk, headphones and eyes on my screen like I was trying to disappear into the pixels. Around 3 p.m., I got a Slack message from him. Just 2 words. Coffee later. My heart jumped. I waited 10 whole minutes before replying. Sure. We met at the corner cafe 2 blocks down. Not the usual bar, not the rooftop. Just a quiet place with decent espresso and chipped mugs. He was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with 2 drinks. My usual. Almond milk. Half sugar. Didn't know if you'd show, he said as I slid into the booth. Didn't know if you wanted me to, I replied. We both smiled small, tired smiles. For a moment, we just sipped in silence. Outside, people walked past umbrellas bobbing under light rain. Inside, there was only us. And the sound of spoons against ceramic. Then he said it. I meant it, you know. My hand paused on the cup. Which part? All of it. The husband line. I know it sounded like a joke. Maybe it was. But maybe it wasn't. I set the cup down gently. Micah, we've known each other for 2 months? You don't even know if I leave dishes in the sink or talk during movies. He chuckled. You strike me as someone who stacks dishes obsessively and watches movies with the captions on. I stared at him. Okay, rude but accurate. He leaned in slightly. Look, I don't know everything about you, but I know how I feel when I'm around you, and that's not nothing. I wanted to say something. Anything. But the words caught in my throat, so instead I asked, what do you want from me? He looked out the window, then back at me. Honesty, that's all. There it was. No grand gesture, no begging, no chasing. Just 2 people sitting in a booth trying to figure out if whatever this was real. And somehow that felt bigger than any confession. I went home that night, turned off my phone, curled up on the couch with my dog, and stared at the ceiling. I kept replaying the look in his eyes when he said I meant it. Not because I didn't believe him, but because what if I felt the same way and wasn't brave enough to say it yet? The next few days at work felt unsteady, not dramatic, just quieter. Micah didn't avoid me. He was still polite, still kind, but the casual ease between us had dimmed. No more side comments during meetings, no knowing glances, no tiny smiles from across the room. It was like someone had lowered the volume on whatever we were becoming. And maybe that was my fault. I'd asked for honesty. He gave it, and I didn't know what to do with it. Thursday afternoon, I saw him in the hallway talking to Nate from DevOps. They were laughing, genuinely laughing. Micah tossed his head back, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a paper cup. And for some stupid reason, it hurt. Because that used to be my moment. My laughter, my coffee across the hallway. And now I was just a coworker with a front row seat to what could have been. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony, legs curled beneath me, mug of lukewarm tea in hand. I stared out at the street lamps and whispered to no one. Why didn't I just say something back? But I already knew the answer. Because sometimes the things that scare us the most are the ones that matter the most. Friday came and I stayed late at the office. Most people were already gone. I needed to fix a broken layout that wouldn't render on mobile, something that normally would take 10 minutes. It took me 45, because I couldn't stop checking Micah's desk. Empty. No note, no goodbye. Just a faint scent of cedar cologne still lingering in the air. I opened Slack, typed hey about the other day, deleted it, typed again. You meant what you said, didn't you? Deleted that too. I closed my laptop and left the office. Saturday afternoon, I wandered through the grocery store, barely aware of what I was putting in the cart. I stood in the frozen foods aisle, way too long, debating between spinach pizza and mushroom like either of them mattered. My phone buzzed. A text from Ava. Saw Micah last night. Looked like he was grabbing dinner with someone. Tall, brunette, cute. Just FYI. I didn't reply. I just stood there staring at the frost-covered boxes, gripping the handle of my cart like it might keep me from crumbling. Was he moving on? Had I waited too long? Was I the one who blinked first in a staring contest neither of us meant to play? That night, I sat in bed with the lights off and scrolled through our message thread. There were only a dozen or so chats, stuff inside jokes, links to dumb memes. No hearts, no flirting, but it still felt like something sacred. At 1:12 a.m., I typed coffee next week, but I didn't send it. Instead, I closed the thread and forced myself to sleep. Sunday came with rain and the kind of quiet that doesn't calm you, it presses on your chest like a weight. And that's when I decided. I wasn't going to wait for clarity. I was going to make space for it. I opened our chat, typed slowly, intentionally, Micah. If you're free after work tomorrow, I owe you an honest answer. This time, I didn't overthink it. No emoji. No punctuation flourishes. Just the truth. He didn't reply for an hour. And during that hour, I must have refreshed my phone 30 times. But when his message came in, it was simple. I'll be there. And suddenly, I was terrified, because the moment I'd been quietly avoiding was now rushing toward me like a freight train. And I wasn't sure if I was brave or just desperate not to miss something that could have changed my life. Monday dragged, every meeting felt longer, every Slack ping louder, every second slower. I changed my shirt 3 times before leaving the office. Nothing flashy, just something that made me feel like me. Like the version of me that might be brave enough to say what needed saying. At 6:04 p.m., I walked out the front doors. Micah was already there, leaning on the passenger side of his car keys, spinning around his index finger. He didn't smile, just nodded toward the seat. Ready, he asked. I nodded, as I'll ever be. We didn't speak much on the drive. The windows were down just enough to catch the breeze. The same mellow jazz played softly, his signature calm. He pulled into a quiet cafe tucked between a bookstore and a laundromat. I'd passed by it 100 times and never noticed it. Inside, it was dim and quiet. Only 2 other customers, both buried in laptops. We took the booth by the window, same as always. He ordered tea. I got coffee I wouldn't finish. There was a pause. The kind of pause that builds pressure like a sealed jar. Micah broke it first. So, what did you want to say? I looked down at my hands. About what you said last week, I began. He didn't move. Didn't blink. The husband thing, I nodded. I laughed. And I shouldn't have. Not because it was wrong, but because I didn't expect to feel anything. Micah leaned back, fingers tracing the rim of his cup. I wasn't trying to trap you, he said quietly. I've spent too many years saying the safe thing. I didn't want to do that with you. My chest tightened. I get that. I do. And honestly, it scared me. He tilted his head. What scared you? I hesitated, then said it out loud. That you might actually mean it. That maybe I do too. Silence. Not cold. Not awkward. Just full. His voice dropped low, barely above a whisper. Then why pull back? Because if this is real, I can't pretend it's casual. And if it's not real, I don't know how to recover from it. Micah looked at me long and quiet. Then finally, I'm not asking for forever. I'm asking if you see the same thing I do. I stared at him. Not at his lips, not his hands, but his eyes. They weren't asking for a performance. They were asking for a yes or a no. And I realized I wasn't afraid of him. I was afraid of me. Of how much I already felt. Of how much I wanted more. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I whispered. I see it too. His shoulders dropped like he'd been holding something up for weeks. He smiled, but not the usual half smirk. A real smile. Gentle, unassuming, like something sacred had just been handed back to him. We sat there for a while after that, not talking, just sitting, letting the air settle. Then he asked, "Want to go for a walk?" I didn't answer. I just grabbed my bag and followed him out the door. The sun had dipped low by then. Streetlights blinked on one by one as we strolled past shuttered shops and quiet sidewalks. We ended up at a tiny neighborhood park I'd never seen before. Micah led us toward a wooden bench under a string of fairy lights stretched across two oaks. We sat down, our shoulders barely touching. Then, without looking at me, he said, "You know, I've never said that to anyone. That line, about being someone's husband." I turned to him. "Why me?" His answer was immediate. "Because you didn't flirt first. You listened first. And I needed that more than I realized." My breath caught. And in that stillness beneath those warm blinking lights, something inside me shifted. I didn't reach for his hand. He didn't lean in for a kiss. We just sat there. Two people choosing to stay in the same silence. Together. But before we left, as we stood up from the bench, Micah turned to me and said, "You know, if you ever asked me, I'd still say yes." And this time, I didn't laugh. After that night, nothing dramatic changed. We didn't kiss. We didn't update our relationship statuses. We didn't text until 2 a.m., whispering sweet nothings into the void. But something had shifted subtly, surely. And we both knew it. The next morning, I walked into the office a few minutes late. Micah was already there, typing quietly, coffee beside him. As I passed his desk, he looked up and gave me a smile, small, almost imperceptible. But it was ours. No one else noticed. But I did, and so did he. That day we shared lunch again. Same table by the window, same rhythm. But something was different. We weren't dancing around feelings anymore. We weren't performing colleague banter. It was just easier, softer. That week we fell into a quiet pattern. He'd bring me coffee on Wednesdays, always the right order. I'd save him a seat for Friday stand-ups, pretending it was accidental. He never called me Elena during meetings, just gave me this tiny nod when I spoke, like his way of saying, "I'm listening. Keep going." One evening after we both stayed late for different projects, he offered to walk me to my car. It wasn't late. The sky was still soft with sunset. But when we reached my car, I didn't open the door right away. "You good?" he asked. I nodded, then paused. "Are we doing this?" I asked. "Like, whatever this is." Micah leaned against the side mirror, hands in his jacket pockets. "I think we already are," he said. "We're just pretending we haven't noticed." That made me laugh, because he was right. We didn't need labels or titles yet, but we had consistency, presence, care that didn't ask to be acknowledged, and that meant more to me than any over-the-top grand gesture. By the end of that month, he'd been to my apartment twice. Nothing romantic. Just Thai takeout, a movie we barely watched, and hours of us sitting on the floor talking about everything, from favorite cereals to childhood scars. One night, I noticed he was folding my blanket after we stood up from the couch. He did it automatically, like he'd done it 100 times before. I didn't say anything, just watched. Because sometimes love doesn't come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives like this, quietly folding itself into the corners of your life. Then came the moment I didn't expect. A random Tuesday. I brought him coffee this time. No big reason, just because. He looked at the cup, then at me and said, "Dangerous move. This makes it official, you know." Official, how I teased. This is married couple who doesn't label things but secretly owns matching Muggs' energy. I laughed. "We're not that cute." He raised an eyebrow. "Speak for yourself." There was that smile again. Half mischief, half promise. And as I walked away, cup in hand, I heard him quietly say, "I could get used to this." That night alone in my apartment, curled up in a hoodie that smelled faintly of cedar and fabric softener, I whispered to no one, "Me too." Time passed. Not in a movie montage kind of way, just quietly, steadily. Little routines formed like brushstrokes on a canvas we didn't even realize we were painting. I'd wake up to texts like, "Don't forget your charger today." And he'd show up at my door with groceries when I said I was too tired to cook. We didn't move in together, but half his hoodie collection lived on my couch. We didn't label anything, but everyone in the office started glancing a little longer when we walked into meetings a beat apart. I never confirmed it. And he never said it out loud, but there was something sacred about keeping it ours. One Friday morning, I came in early with 2 coffees in hand. His was exactly how he liked it, black with a splash of oat milk. He looked up, smirked, and said, "You're dangerously consistent." "It's a talent," I replied. Then he glanced down at my t-shirt, the one I'd slept in, grabbed off the chair, and forgot had bold letters printed across the front. Temporary wife. Permanent vibes. He raised an eyebrow. Really, I blushed. I swear I didn't plan this. So, subliminal messages now. Maybe, I said, sipping my coffee. Depends on who's reading. He just shook his head, laughed under his breath, and went back to his screen. But the silence that followed, it wasn't empty. It was charged. And I knew he'd read it. That night, we didn't talk about it. But the next morning, he showed up at my door with a bag of groceries, a bouquet of wildflowers, and a simple sentence. I was thinking. Pancakes, we made them together in my kitchen. Burned the first batch. Laughed through the second. And somewhere between pouring syrup and arguing over whose turn it was to do the dishes, he looked at me and said, "So, do you still think I'd make a decent husband?" I smiled. Didn't look away. Didn't deflect. "Not today," I said, "but maybe someday." He didn't push. Didn't press. Just walked over, kissed the side of my head, and whispered, "Someday works for me." We never made a big announcement, no flash proposal, no viral moment. But over time, things unfolded the way real things do. He met my mom. I met his sister. We picked out bookshelves together, fought over paint samples, made up over pizza and dumb sitcoms. And then, nearly a year after that day at the cafe, we rented a cabin in the woods for a long weekend, just the two of us. No Wi-Fi, no distractions, just firewood that wouldn't light and stars that looked close enough to touch. On the second morning, I stepped out onto the porch in a sweater 3 sizes too big. He was already out there reading, sipping coffee, hair messy from sleep. I sat beside him. He looked up, set his mug down, and said it with a quiet that shook me. "I could be your husband, you know, if you ever asked." I didn't blink, didn't deflect. I just leaned in, rested my head on his shoulder, and replied, "Then ask." And he did. No ring, no crowd. Just that moment. Just us. I said yes, not because it was perfect, not because it followed some checklist, but because it felt like home. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of staying. We still haven't set a date, haven't even told everyone. But when he looks at me now, he doesn't joke. And when I look at him, I don't need a label to know what we are. I just know. We made it, quietly, together,